any chart. The land of the Lotus-Eaters. The people there are not hostile. That's what makes it frightening. They offer the scouts a fruit, and the men who eat it lose all desire to go home. Not their memory, their want. They simply stop caring. Odysseus has to drag them back to the ships and physically tie them under the benches while they weep. Consider what the poem is saying in its very second episode. The first threat to a man's homecoming was violence. The second threat is contentment. It is the possibility of being happy somewhere else. That threat is going to come back, in a far more sophisticated form, and it's going to have a goddess's face. Now, the famous one, they land on a wild island of goats, and across a channel is another shore, and Odysseus does something that is entirely characteristic and entirely unnecessary. There is no need to go over there. They have food, they have water. He goes because he wants to see who lives there. Curiosity. Not greed, not need. He says it himself. He wanted to find out what kind of men these were and whether they would give him guest gifts. He takes 12 men and a skin of extraordinarily strong wine, and they find a cave, huge, full of cheeses and penned lambs. The men say, "Take the cheese, take the lambs, go." Odysseus says no. "We'll wait for the owner." The owner is Polyphemus, a Cyclops, a one-eyed giant the size of a mountain crag, who rolls a stone across the cave mouth that 20 wagons could not move, and then eats 2 of the men, raw, for dinner. Now here Odysseus is trapped by his own cleverness in a beautiful way. He cannot simply kill the giant in his sleep. If he does, they all die in the cave, because they cannot move the stone. He has to solve a problem with 2 constraints. The giant must be neutralized, and the giant must open the door. So, the wine. He offers it. Polyphemus drinks and is delighted and asks his name. And Odysseus says, "Nobody. My name is Nobody. That's what my mother and father call me." The giant, charmed, promises a guest gift in return. He will eat nobody last. Then he passes out. They take an olive wood staff, sharpen it, harden the point in the fire, and drive it into the single eye. And when Polyphemus screams, the other Cyclopes come running to the cave and shout through the stone, "Who is hurting you? Who is killing you?" And he answers, "Nobody is killing me." So they go home. Of course they do. If nobody's hurting you, they tell him, it must be a sickness sent by the gods, and there's nothing we can do about that. Pray. That is, I think, the oldest joke in Western literature, still funny in the original. The blinded giant opens the cave at dawn to let his flocks out, sitting at the entrance, feeling the back of every sheep as it passes, and Odysseus lashes the rams together in 3s and ties each man underneath the middle one and clings to the belly of the great ram himself, and they walk out under the giant's hands. They make the ships. They are alive. It is a total victory. And then Odysseus ruins his own life, because as they row away he cannot resist. He stands up and shouts back at the shore. He taunts the blind giant, and his men beg him to stop. The giant is hurling boulders that nearly swamp the ship, and he does it again anyway, and this time he gives his real name. Odysseus, son of Laertes, of Ithaca. Remember it. He needed the credit. After all that cleverness, he could not bear for the story to be told about nobody. And Polyphemus lifts his hands and prays to his father. And his father is Poseidon, god of the sea, the god on whose element this man must travel for the next 10 years. And he asks, "Let him come home late and broken and alone in a stranger's ship, and let him find trouble in his house." Every single word of that curse comes true. That's the tragedy at the heart of Odysseus. His great gift is that he can hide who he is. His great flaw is that he cannot bear to hide it forever. 2 disasters, quickly. They come to a floating island ruled by Aeolus, keeper of the winds, who treats them magnificently for a month, and then gives Odysseus a parting gift. A leather bag, tied with silver wire, containing every wind except the gentle west wind that will blow them home. 9 days they sail. On the 10th day, they are close enough to see Ithaca, close enough to see the men on shore tending their fires. And Odysseus, who has not slept in 9 days because he will not let anyone else touch the sail, finally falls asleep, and his crew, who have watched him receive gifts at every stop, who have carried nothing home themselves, who assume that bag is full of gold he isn't sharing, open it. Every wind on earth comes out at once. They are blown all the way back to Aeolus, who takes one look at them and refuses to help again. A man this hated by the gods, he says, is not someone I'm going to assist. Then the Laestrygonians, another harbour, another cannibal people. But these ones are not a solitary shepherd. They are a nation. They stand on the cliffs above the harbour and drop boulders onto the ships packed below and spear the men in the water like fish. 11 ships destroyed. 11 crews gone in an afternoon. Odysseus's ship survives only because he, cautious for once or lucky, had moored outside the harbour. 1 ship left, out of 12. They come to Aea, and a scouting party finds a house of polished stone in a forest clearing, with wolves and lions moving around it, tame, fawning, wrong. Inside, a goddess singing at a great loom. Circe, witch, enchantress, daughter of the sun. She feeds the men, and the food is drugged, and when they've eaten, she strikes them with a wand, and they become pigs. Real pigs, bristles, snouts, the whole thing. And she drives them into a sty and throws them acorns. And here is the cruelest line in the passage. They had the mind of a man still inside. 1 man escapes and runs back to the ship. And Odysseus, say what you like about him, goes alone, up that path, to a house of a goddess who turns men into livestock with nothing but a sword. On the way, the god Hermes meets him and gives him a herb called moly, blackroot, white flower, which no mortal can dig up. It makes him immune. So when Circe strikes him with the wand and he does not change, she understands instantly who he is. She'd been warned that Odysseus would come one day, and she falls at his knees. They come to an arrangement. She restores his men. She swears an oath not to harm him, and they stay. For 1 year. I want you to feel that year, because the poem passes over it almost casually. 12 months of good food and warm beds and a goddess's company, while a woman on Ithaca is holding a kingdom together alone. And it is not Odysseus who ends it, it's his men. They come to him and say, essentially, "Sir, it's time. Do you remember home?" That's the second temptation, and it's the same one as the lotus, in a much better dress. Before they go, Circe tells him the price of leaving. He cannot sail home yet. He must first sail to the edge of the world and go down to the land of the dead and ask a prophet's ghost for directions. This is the center of the poem. Book 11 of 24. The exact middle. That is not an accident. They sail to the far edge of the ocean, to a shore of perpetual fog where the sun never shines, and dig a pit and pour offerings and cut the throats of sheep so the blood runs into the earth, and the dead come up out of the dark to drink it. They come in a crowd, brides, young men, old men, soldiers still in their bloodied armor, and Odysseus has to stand there with a drawn sword and keep them back from the blood until the one he needs arrives. First, though, comes a shock. One of his own crew, Elpenor, who got drunk on Circe's roof, fell off and broke his neck, and they left without noticing. He begs for burial. "Bury me," he says, "so I'm not forgotten." Then Tiresias, the blind prophet, and he gives the instructions. You will come to an island where the cattle of the sun graze. Do not touch them. If you touch them, you lose everything, and you come home late and alone in a stranger's ship to find trouble in your house. And then Tiresias tells him one more thing, and it is the strangest prophecy in Greek literature, and we'll come back to it at the end because almost nobody knows it. Then his mother comes, Anticlea, Who was alive when he left for Troy? He didn't know. He asks how she died, and she says, "It was you. Not illness, not age. Longing for you, missing you killed me." And he tries to embrace her. 3 times he throws his arms around her. 3 times she goes through his hands like smoke, like a dream. I have taught this passage for a long time, and I have never once been able to read it without stopping. Then the war dead. Agamemnon, the great commander, king of kings, who tells him how he came home from Troy at last, and his wife and her lover murdered him at his own welcome feast. He was cut down beside a table full of food. Come home in secret, he warns Odysseus. Trust no woman. And then, because even in death he's fair, except yours. Yours was always good. And then Achilles, the greatest warrior, the man who chose a short, glorious life over a long, quiet one.